Hello, everyone. My name is Julie McVeigh, and this is Unordinary Made Ordinary, where we talk about extraordinary experiences of everyday people. After today's interview, if you would like to continue the conversation of all things metaphysical, paranormal, and supernatural, feel free to join our private UMO group by clicking on the link in the video description. And today, our guest is Karen Swain. Welcome, Karen, to the
Hi,
show.
hi, Julie. Great to be on your show. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. So we're going to get right into it. If you wouldn't mind, Karen, could you just share a little bit about yourself, a little background?
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'm in Sydney, Australia, and I grew up in the eastern suburbs of Sydney, which is a beachside town in the cities. Sydney is such a beautiful city. It's right on the coast. Quite privileged, and came from a family, a very dysfunctional family. Dad came from a wealthy background, mum came from a poor background, and they came together, and back in those days it wasn't considered the thing to do. And so there was lots of controversy around their relationship. She came from a poor working class background, he came from a rich background. And yeah, that was interesting to watch growing up. And it was quite a dysfunctional marriage. Dad said he had 7 years of heaven and 7 years of hell. And I remember the 7 years of hell. So they got divorced. Dad left her for a pretty young model, and mum's ego and her self-esteem plummeted. And it took her about 5 years to get sick and die after that. And so as a kid, I was very curious and asking a million questions. Where do we come from? What are we doing here? I remember saying to mum, how can a kid be born in sin? And we weren't religious at all, but you know, these things you hear in school. Even the school I went to was very secular. It wasn't a religious school, but you know, you hear that you have to get baptized because babies are born in sin. And I'm like, how does that work? And I was asking all these questions, and poor old mum didn't know. She didn't even want to know, and dad didn't want to know. But when she got sick, I started watching her illness and thinking, why do people get sick? And then she dies, of course, and I'm like, wow, you know, why?
Yeah.
And I asked, where do we go when we die? And if there's a place that we go to, we must be there before we get here. Like, what is that place?
Huh.
So life answered my questions, as it does. You know, when you ask questions, you get the answers. And mum used to come to me in dreams and tell me she wasn't dead. And when
Oh.
I was young, I didn't understand that, because when I was having the dream, Julie, it was like, have you ever had a dream that feels so real? Like you don't actually know you're dreaming?
That
Cyrus would call it astral traveling, right?
I do lucid dream and astral travel as well.
Right. Yeah. So I'm at that stage, I didn't know what I just thought I was living. I didn't realize I was dreaming. And I would find her somewhere. It was always a strange place. It was like in another country or in another state or in somebody else's house, in a strange place. It was never in my home. And I think that the dreamscape was trying to give me the understanding that she wasn't here on earth, she was somewhere else. And I would say, you're here, you're alive, you're not dead. And she'd go, no, I'm not dead, I didn't die, Karen. And I'm like, you didn't die? You didn't die? What do you mean you didn't die? And I was always so confused. And then I would say, well, if you didn't die, where the hell have you been? And I'd have these dreams repeatedly. And
Wow.
it was
That's,
you know, like
that's
over my young life. And it basically put me on my spiritual journey, trying to understand what the hell was going on. So I read a lot of books. And you know, young kids are always asking, you know, who am I and what am I supposed to do in this world? And we have some ideas. Dad's second wife was a model, and I think she wanted to be in fashion, and so I followed that trajectory, thinking that that's what I wanted to do. And then I thought, no, that's kind of boring. I think every young girl wants to sort of be in the fashion or something, you know, like we're so indoctrinated when we're young, aren't we? To look beautiful, look pretty, dress, you know, clothes are a whole life, you know,
right.
shoes, clothes, right? Yeah,
Right.
makeup, hair. So I watch my nieces do the same, you know, we get indoctrinated to that. That's what we've got to focus on. If we're not academic, you know, like we focus on that sort of beauty part and fashion and stuff like that, which is what I did. I think I did a dress design course when I was like 16, left school. I just knew I didn't want to be at school.
Mm.
And then what happened? I think, yeah, I was like in my early 20s, and my flatmate was going to do a massage course. And she was working
Ah.
as a makeup she still does all these years, work makeup in the film industry, and she couldn't do the course because she'd got a job. And she said, do you want to do this course? And I was like, no, not interested. And she said, oh, please, 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 you don't have to pay. I'll give it to you. I don't want to waste it. And so I did this massage course, a weekend massage course. And the couple that were running it were telling their story, and they were saying they're on the corporate ladder, they're in the corporate world, earning big money, you know, climbing up, crawling up the corporate ladder. They had money, they had a house, they had all the stuff, but they were really unhappy. They had no time for themselves. And I remember just listening to their story, and they said, and they left the corporate world and they started this massage course, and they were running these things, and they had time, and they were doing something and they love. And I think, I just remember thinking, these people know something. These people know something about life that I need to listen to. And so instead of pursuing some corporate world, I looked into alternative healing.
Wow. Okay.
And then embarked on a 5-year full-time naturopathy course, and did that for 5 years full-time, 9 to 5 every day, and left that, had a baby, opened a furniture and homeware shop, because I didn't feel like I had learned anything that was going to change the world. So it was really interesting. I went to a psychic reader during that time. So this is in my early 20s. And she said something to me that kind of shocked me. She said, in a past life, you were a doctor many times, and you couldn't understand why, 10 people with the same disease didn't respond to the same treatment. Like there was this variation, and you died in many lifetimes thinking, like, what is it? What is it that creates healing if it's not the pill or the drug or the herb or the treatment? Like, what is it if everyone's not responding to the same treatment? And in this life, you're looking for the answer. And Julie, I looked back on my time as a naturopathic student, and I thought, oh my God, I am. Because I remember every teacher that came in and said, right, we're going to talk about herbs today. And then somebody else would come in, we're going to talk about homeopathy today. We're going to talk about massage today. Every teacher I met when I was in my early 20s, I'm like, they've got the answer. They've got the answer. So I didn't realize I was asking a question I didn't know I was asking that question, but I was asking that question.
Right.
And that's why I was so
interesting.
curious, isn't it? That's why I was so curious. I was asking my parents, they didn't know. And then I was asking all these teachers, they didn't know. And after 5 years full-time study, I didn't have the answer to that question, what does it take? And so I kept looking, and I embarked on many healing courses, energy healing courses. Because after I shut the furniture shop, homeware shop, I went into massage because I was good at it. It's a good way to earn money. I was a roaming masseuse. I used to go and, go to places, and I worked in the film industry to make money. And so I had lots of film industry friends. So lots of people that came out here to make films, movie stars, I would massage them. But what I noticed is I started receiving all this information about people. There was this Hollywood movie star that came out. I never mention her name because I want to give her privacy. And she was in a lot of back pain. And she was running around from practitioner to practitioner to practitioner, trying to help heal her back pain. And she had the picture of a guru sitting. She was in a hotel, sitting on the chest of drawers in the bedroom where I was massaging her. And I remember I was massaging her, looking at this guru, thinking, what's all this Indian guru thing about? Like, why do people have pictures of long-haired Indian gurus and pray to the guru? I didn't understand it. And in that moment, my crown chakra opened. And what happened was I felt like my head was physically expanding. It was the weirdest experience I've ever had. And I literally felt like my ears were going to touch the walls. And I'm massaging this woman thinking, what is happening to me? And I started channeling. And she had all these questions about, why am I sick? Why have I got this pain? And I told her, and I told her why she was born into the family she was in, why she chose, because she came from quite a well-known family, and why she did what she did, and what she was like. I started answering her questions like some guru was channeling through me. I asked the question, what's all this guru thing about?
And
Here
you go.
Here you go. And, I don't know how she actually, she turned that information, like I gave her a lot of advice, not me, the guru gave her a lot of advice through me. And she became that, like they asked her to change her life and be more of service rather than chasing the fame and the fortune, and
Mm.
be more in
Wow.
service. And she did that. Like years later, I looked her up and she was doing that. But I left
Wow.
that experience thinking, what the hell was that about?
Mhm.
Wow.
Mhm.
And I was seeing an acupuncturist at the time because after that, my state of consciousness wasn't ready for that expansion to happen so quickly.
Mhm.
And so I had a headache for about 3 days. My head was just throbbing,
Okay.
because we've got to ease into this, like this stuff, like the channeling and
Mhm.
opening
Mhm.
our psychic and our third eye. We kind of
Yeah.
have to ease into it, because when we're rooted in limiting, in fear-based thinking, it's a very different vibration. So you've kind of got to
Mhm.
clean it out little by little so that you
Interesting.
can expand and expand. And
Slowly.
um, I remember going to our acupuncturist, telling him what had happened and saying, "Can you fix my headache?"
Mhm.
And he couldn't. It's just that I had to sort of stop criticizing myself, stop
Mm.
worrying. I had to
Mm.
clean up my subconscious negative thoughts and able to hold that amount of energy. And that's really the spiritual journey
Interesting.
that we're all on, like there are so many people, I'm sure, that watch your show that are interested in this stuff, that are like, how do
Very
I expand my third eye,
consciousness.
and how do I expand my psychic abilities, and how do I become a healer and channel energy? But
Mhm.
we have to do the personal growth work first.
I've heard
We
that
have
over and
to,
over. Mhm.
yeah, we have to look at what we believe about ourselves and stop the limiting beliefs, and turn it around.
Mm.
And that's a process of
Mhm.
personal growth and meditation, and looking at why you believe what you believe, and choosing if you want to
Mm.
do that. Like if you've got a problem and you're
Yeah.
upset about it, it always comes back to how you feel about yourself rather than what's going on outside yourself. Yeah, go on. You've got a
Mm.
question.
No, just it's interesting because I remember having headaches sometimes um during and after astral travel, after going out of the
Yeah,
body. It's like a
yeah.
sudden like headache, and so that's interesting. I was curious, you had those dreams about your mom starting from how old were you when she passed,
Well,
and then
after I
how
was 16, about I was 16, yeah. I think I was about 12 or 13 when she got sick. Well, when I was conscious of her being sick. She was probably sick before then, but when she started complaining.
mm,
And yeah, it took her about 4 or 5 years to get sick and die.
excuse me,
Mm.
and then you started having these dreams at right after her passing?
Yeah, it's a long time ago now, Julie. Yeah,
Okay.
I remember that it was 4 o'clock in the morning when the phone rang and the hospital said your mum had passed. But she, at that point, was a corpse in a bed. Like the chemotherapy that she had, like this is
Mm,
like it. This was answering questions too, because I was watching the allopathic treatment just ravage her body, just
mm,
like poison her body. And she
mhm.
was emaciated. She was a skeleton, but she had all this fluid in her abdomen. So she looked like she was having triplets. She didn't look pregnant.
Gotcha.
She
Yep.
had this, and they'd have to drain all this fluid. So it
Yeah.
was like hideous watching this woman's body just deteriorate. And
Mhm,
oh, it was
mhm,
awful.
mhm.
So about the last 2 weeks of her life, she wasn't even conscious. She was just like, just like in this. They had pumped her full of so
Sure, her
much
body.
morphine. And at that point, you're just saying, please go, like
Of
put her out of her
course.
misery. So anyway, when I got the call, I'm kind of thinking, okay, what am I supposed to feel now? Because we're so indoctrinated into death being a
Yeah.
tragic thing.
Yeah.
Like we've got to cry when someone dies, but when you're seeing someone suffer and then their suffering is over, do we cry or do we celebrate? Right. And so I'm
Such yeah.
indoctrinated. I'm a kid. I'm indoctrinated into like
Yeah.
death is a sad thing. We've got to cry. And
Yeah.
I'm hanging up the phone and I'm torn. I'm sort of like, I'm supposed to be feeling sad now. Or am I supposed to happy? Like I'm not supposed to be happy. And I had this
Right.
like, yeah.
Mhm.
And I think it was pretty soon after that. I can't tell you when, weeks, months, I
That
don't
was
know.
very that was wonderful of her to meet you in your dreams and help
She
you.
was she came to answer my questions because
I
I kept
mean,
harassing her when she was in the physical, and now she's in spirit. And she's like, okay, now I've got some answers to
now
her
I
questions.
finally have a few answers for you, my dear. Yeah, we really
Yeah,
are need to do a better job with death and explaining that to our kids and helping.
right,
Yeah, we're really behind on that. That's
right.
conversations like this are helping.
Yeah, exactly,
And so
exactly.
did you continue having lucid dreams through the years, or no, you didn't? Did you?
Yeah.
Oh, you did. Of various
Oh,
kinds.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because the questions didn't stop. And it's been a long life. I've got to pick which parts of it I want to tell you.
Ah,
Um,
yeah, it sounds like
this,
you've been doing this a long time.
this is
Curious.
one of the look, I've said this in most podcasts, but it's one of the most extensive experiences I've had with her. I actually wrote a book called Return to Love, which is my experiences of death, because so many people I knew and loved died, best friends, and they all came to tell me that there's no such thing, that they're not dead, that there's no death. There's no death. You don't die. And so when I was
Mm.
suffering about who I am in the world and what I'm supposed to do to make a difference and what I wanted to make a movie, a documentary to enlighten people or something. They said, "Oh, stop stressing, just write something down." And I'm like, "Well, what do I write?" And they said, "Well, write what you know." And I said, "Well, I know about death, because all my dead friends tell me that they're not dead." And they said,
Wow.
"Well, write about that." So I did. And that was my first book, called Return to Love, or one of my first books. I actually wrote about law of attraction before that. How do I
Oh.
get what I want was the ebook that I put out. And so I had this experience where I was divorced and a single mum, and was it was Christmas time, and my daughter was about to go into the Christmas play. I had a Japanese student staying with me to help me pay the rent, and she was actually older. Normally they're younger. She was like in her 50s. She was gorgeous. And anyway, I
Mm.
was busy mum. Like, I had to pick up the costume and drive to school and drop off the costume and then go home and cook the dinner, and like busy mum. And I thought, I'll just take 5 minutes to have a shower. About 4 o'clock in the morning, I'll take 5 minutes to have a shower and just relax, and just relax. I love water. I always feel better when I'm like near water.
Mhm.
So I did. I sat in the bottom of the shower and just like relaxed. And I had, bang,
Mm.
my mother's face just turn up in my third eye, her profile like this, just the head, the floating head. And then she
Ah.
turned and looked at me, and I'm like, oh God, Mum, I haven't got time for this. I'm really busy. I just don't have time to do the talking to the dead people thing right now. And so I opened my eyes to try and get rid of her. And and she I don't know, I don't know who, but it was like I felt her, like she was in the room with me. I don't know if you,
Mm.
like, I could smell her, I could feel her, I could sense her. All my other um senses came
Senses.
online. It was
Yeah.
like she was physically in the room with me.
Mm.
And I knew she'd come to tell me something, and I said, "Oh, you've come to tell me something, but I don't have time. I'll call you back," sort of thing. And then the next morning, I got a phone call from my ex-husband telling me that my best friend had committed suicide. And I
Oh.
said,
Oh,
when
shoot.
when when did they find her? And it was exactly the same time that Mum had come to,
Oh.
4 o'clock in the
Okay.
afternoon is when they found her. I don't know when she died, but that's when they found her, about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And then I had experiences with her on the other side. She actually was a bit of a ghost. She was haunting people for a couple of weeks after her death. People
Really?
that, yeah, people that didn't believe in this stuff. Some best friends that really didn't believe in this stuff. They had
Ah.
experiences of her. One girlfriend said she was walking down the stairs and she got this fright, and she saw this sort of shadowy sort of image on the stairwell, and she's like, and then when she relaxed, she just had this knowing that it was Kate, right? And then another friend said that he woke up one day in bed. It's funny because I think of her sense of humor, even though when she killed herself, she wasn't laughing, she was pretty unhappy at the time. But
Mm.
he said, remember, you hear people that they feel like someone's sitting on their chest and they can't move. You've ever
Mhm.
heard that? People talk
Mhm.
about that.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
he was experiencing that. He was experiencing this, um, in bed, being like he couldn't move and he was scared. And again, he relaxed enough. And it's in that place of relaxing when you're outside of the fear that you get the information.
Yep.
And he instantly knew, and these people didn't believe in ghosts and life after death, but they both knew that it was Kate. Like he had this knowing. So
Mm-hmm.
she transmitted that information somehow to these
Yeah.
skeptical minds.
Wow.
So they had this sort of scary experience, but then they realized that it was Kate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And
It's
so
not
she was
really
haunting,
haunting though then. She
she was
sounds like
haunting
she's trying to
people.
be helpful ultimately,
She was she was getting their attention. She
getting
was
their attention.
she was, yeah, like, oh, I'm here. And I would go to bed at night and fall asleep in my bed and wake up in my astral form, and she'd be sitting on the end of the bed waiting for me. And then we'd go off and have, like, we continued our relationship for a time.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. And I said, I remember saying distinctly to her, Kate, everyone thinks you're dead. Everyone's like gossiping about you and talking about you because she sort of committed suicide. And like, did she do it purposely? Because she was found in a swimming pool. And did she
Mm,
drown? And did she, there was all this gossip. Everyone's talking about
sure.
you.
Yeah.
And I remember saying to her, they all think you're dead, darling. They all think you're dead. And she goes, yeah, I know. And I said, but you're not dead. And she goes, I know, but they don't know, but
Hmm.
yeah, I remember having that conversation with her.
So, I mean, as you eased in, I guess that you eased into all of this because otherwise, some of this would blow me away if it's just suddenly happening to me. But I guess with the lucid dreams and you started seeing things when when you got into the massage and I mean, did you start channeling too after that, continuing to channel?
Well, when it happens to you spontaneous like that, you don't really understand what's going on. So then you reach out to teachers, like people like me, and I suspect you're doing this too. And you ask questions like, what's happening to me? And so I did energy healing courses to deliberately expand my psychic ability and to understand healing and how to channel healing, because I knew I wasn't going to be a healer. I knew I was here to be a healer and a teacher. In fact,
Hmm.
when I was 12, the nanny to my dad's second wife, the model, said to me, let me read your palm. And I'm like, what do you want to do? I'm going to read your palm. And she said three things to me that had me running to my room in tears. She said, you'll be a teacher and you'll get married when you're like 27 and you'll have a baby when you're 27. So she said, what I do when I get married and when I have a child. And to a 12-year-old, 27 was like so ancient.
Yeah, I remember.
And the teacher was like, for math, I hated school. I was a dyslexic kid that couldn't wait to get out of school. And so it was the
Yeah.
worst news she ever
Huh.
gave me. And I was like screaming and crying. And dad said, what did you do to the kid? And she's like, oh, sorry. And she got in trouble. But it was the best thing because it was absolutely spot on. I tried to make her wrong. I did get married when I was 27, but I didn't have a baby till I was 28. I was trying to make her wrong, but I couldn't make her wrong. Anyway, and so she said, you're a teacher. And when I set up shop as a healer, because when I was massaging, I would get all this information. I had to stop calling myself a masseuse. Like, what do I call myself? Because I was freaking people out. I was giving them these psychic readings and
Hmm.
they were freaked out. And the look on their face. There was another Hollywood movie star that was out here. I'll never forget it. And I was telling him all this stuff, and his face was just so. And I remember walking out of his hotel room going, I totally have to change what I call myself because this
Yeah.
is freaking people out. And then I didn't know what to call myself. And so I called myself spiritual healer for a time, which never really
Okay.
sat with me. And I also,
Mm,
after I did
yeah.
some healing courses, people were coming to me for healings, and it never sat with me that they were putting the power of their healing in my hands. It never sat well with me. I wanted to empower people.
Hmm.
You have the power to heal.
Hmm.
I can teach you, I can help you, I can show you, I can heal you, but ultimately it's your choice. And so I wanted to, calling myself healer didn't feel right. And then I reverted back to teacher, teacher of deliberate creation. So, but finding a label, what we call ourselves, like I had a woman on the show yesterday called herself a shaman. You
Hmm.
might want to interview her. She was a judge, and then her son died, and then she had a complete transformation from being a judge
Wow.
and in the military to like
Wow.
doing crystals, like doing what we do. But now she calls herself a shaman, which is just another name for teacher. Or you can call yourself guru, or you can call yourself a starseed, or a
Right.
channeler, or a medium, or a psychic. There's so many labels that we can give ourselves. So
Well, if
Yeah.
I can ask you a few questions, my listeners would be very interested in the afterlife. If you have any information from all of your experiences, I know you've had so many. Um, so is that okay if I ask you a few questions?
Yeah. Oh, go for it.
Okay. What do you say about reincarnation? What is that all
Well,
about?
well, I can say a lot about it. Let me tell you my experience. So mum is back. She came back. She's a 25-year-old opera singer. She died, over 40 years ago, and she's a family member. And when she was a baby, I was holding her in my hand and my arms.
Wait,
And
wait, how did
what?
you find out? Wait a
Yeah,
minute.
no, I'm holding her in my
Okay.
hands, and she's just been born. She's just come out of hospital, and I have this feeling of mum. I can feel mum, right?
Oh.
And I think, oh, mum's come to see the baby. That's nice. Mum's come to see the baby. And then I got this message.
Mhm.
No, because I have guides, like you said, I speak to what I irreverently call the mob, or blissful beings, is a prettier name I gave them. But it's like the Ascended Masters and the Palladian Collective and the Archangels. It's kind of the mob. It's like the gamut of who you can speak to. I just call them the mob. So they said to me, no, Karen, that's not what you're experiencing. And I said, well, what am I experiencing? And they said, look into her eyes. Like, they didn't give me the information. They're teachers, like I'm a
Mhm.
teacher. They want you to
Yeah.
find out for yourself. So I looked into her eyes. And as soon as I looked into her eyes, I just had this overwhelming knowing. And I'm like, oh my God, she's back.
Wow.
Right.
Whoa. Trip. Okay.
And she doesn't know this. She came to live with me for a couple of years, and she would say things like, I don't remember who I was in my past life. And I'd look at her and I'd say, yeah, you're not supposed to. Because I didn't want, because she would know, because she was related to, herself. I didn't want her to compare herself to her other life.
Wait,
She needs to sort
whose
of,
baby is this though? I don't think you
this
told
is
me.
a relative's baby.
A
Yeah.
relative of you, of yours,
Yeah. Yeah. So she's
baby.
a
Okay, so
relative. Yeah.
she's okay. Wow,
Yeah.
okay. And she stayed with you
And
for a while. You said
yeah,
she
because they
stayed with
moved out of the city and she wanted to come and study in the city. So she stayed with Auntie Karen.
It's kind of a trip.
And it's been wild watching her. So my mother, as I said to you, really didn't want to get married and have babies. She wanted to have a name and lights, and watching her fulfill unfulfilled desires. It's
Mhm.
been amazing. It's been such an
Hmm.
education for me to see it happening, personally, to know one person in two lifetimes, and
Mhm.
and to be so close with that person.
Mhm.
And so there were things like, when I was a kid, she used to brush my hair and she used to say, oh, you've got thin, awful hair, just like your mother. And she used to like, and I'd be like, please stop brushing my hair. And she'd say, I wish I had thick hair. And then she used to love sunbaking, and she had a lot of freckles and she had skin cancers burnt off. And she'd said, I wish I had beautiful olive skin. And then she would complain about not having big enough boobs and being too tall. She was always complaining about something. And when she came back, she had all those desires fulfilled. Like, she has this really thick hair, she
Wow.
has this
Okay.
beautiful olive skin, she's got really big boobs, and she comes from tall parents, but she had this spinal problem when she was a kid that stunted her growth a bit.
Hmm.
So she's not as tall as me or as tall as she
Wow.
was before. So
Mhm.
she had this, because in those days she said, oh, tall women intimidate men. I think men like little women. This was her idea. And
Okay.
so she's kind of more like, because she was tall in that life, and she's more like a normal height in this life. Her sister's a lot taller. And so I saw her fulfill these unfulfilled desires.
Interesting. Okay.
And then I'm seeing her fulfill the desire for, to have the fame and to be the
Mhm.
entertainer. And my sister-in-law had said to me, she doesn't want to get married and have children. And I kind of looked at her and I said, yeah, because she didn't want to before, she wanted
Yeah.
to pursue a career,
Right.
and she's studying opera. And I said to her,
Wow.
why did you choose opera and not pop music? And she said, oh, I just didn't think it was challenging. Opera would be more challenging. But remember, I said to you, in those days, to be an entertainer, it was not seen as good
Mm.
girls don't, nice girls don't do that. So
Mhm.
opera has more of a stigma. It's more respected and
Yeah.
more revered.
Yep.
So you can see why she's making these decisions.
Wild.
Isn't it
Yep.
wild? And she
Very
doesn't have consciousness, like,
of that.
she's not
Yeah.
conscious why she's making this decision.
Right.
Just like
Right.
I wasn't, just like I wasn't conscious that I was asking a question when I was studying, until some psychic said, "You're asking a question." I'm going, I am. I'm totally
Mm,
asking this question. So it's so
mm,
interesting that our past lives can kind of
yeah.
fund the decisions that we make, and we're not really conscious of why we're making those decisions. But until you awaken, and then you become conscious of it. Yeah.
Would you say then that this Earth, or at least this planet, I don't know about other planets, is for learning purposes or experiential or
Well,
both?
both. Yeah, yeah, both. We learn and we experience from our standpoint in the spirit. We can't experience pain, and we can't experience negative emotion, and we can't experience things like forgiveness, or we can't experience longing, or the thrill of when you've
Mm,
not had something and then you get it, that like thrill of
mm,
like missing something and then having it return, or
mhm.
there's so much beauty to the contrast that we experience in the physical life that we can't have when we're in spirit, because we come from pure positive energy, and there are
Mm.
many dimensions of positive vibration, like joy and bliss and excitements and rapture and all that sort of thing, but we can't experience separateness. So we come here to explore separateness, because in that realm we're one with God, we're one with each other, we're unified. And in this realm we have the illusion of separateness. So we believe that we're separate from what we want. We're separate from love, we're separate from health, we're separate from each other. And so we're exploring this idea of separateness. Go on, you got a question?
Um, yeah, you have me thinking about a lot of different things. So, can we incarnate on other planets that have similar separateness and experiences, longing,
Absolutely.
joy, maybe even
Absolutely.
suffering? Do all of the planets in this universe have equal amounts of suffering? Because I
No.
would say personally, it's from my personal opinion, that this particular planet has extreme levels of suffering for a lot of
Extreme. It has an
people.
extreme it has an extreme bandwidth of vibrational frequency that you can experience. So when you look at the emotional scale, the worst emotion you can have is the feeling of being completely separate from what you want. And we call that loneliness or despair or depression.
Mhm,
So when we're indulging in thoughts of separateness, like I can't have what I want, I'm lost, I don't know who I am, I'm lonely, I'm alone. And that's why grief is such a hard thing to overcome, because you
mhm,
believe that you're separate from that which you love, being it a person or an animal. When you're not, like all my dead friends, like, we're not dead, you're not separate from me. It's a complete illusion that we get to experience here. And you can't experience that when you're dead, like when you're in spirit. But
well,
in other realms, like other planets and other
yes.
dimensions, they don't have that same illusional structure in place.
Mm,
So the unity consciousness is more dominant throughout the universe.
mhm,
So most planets, not all, but most planets and dimensions have the understanding, because unity is the number one principle of who we are. We are one. And so they understand the unification of all things. And they also have this understanding of different levels of frequency, bandwidths of frequency. Like many ETs and people I've had on the show who hang out with the ETs are speaking with spirits like orbs of light that are not incarnate in some form, be it an ET form or a human form. But they're having this interaction with orbs of light and communicating telepathically. So they understand, that it's like they're not having afterlife podcasts, because it's just a part of their mode of operandi. They just operate in that way. They understand we're physical and spirit simultaneously, and there's no separation between life and death. Whereas
mhm,
here we have the illusion that there is a separation, that there's this, and then there is we call it the afterlife.
mhm,
But it's not really an afterlife. It's just life. There is just life and more life in different form, in different frequency, and different experience. And so when you expand your awareness and your psychic ability, you start to connect to the multidimensional aspects of you, because we are incarnate and not incarnate simultaneously. We speak about on many podcast shows that, you die and then you go to spirit, but you're already in spirit. So one of the most beautiful conversations I had on my show was with a doctor in New York doctor, and his son had died 30 years before. He was mentally challenged. He lived to 22, and he started channeling to him, this sort of skeptical, logical doctor brain. He started receiving his son, who was a master spirit, and he started teaching him from spirit. And he had this conversation with his son, Christopher, where he was like speaking in the linear human way, like I'm here and I'm there, like I'm here, and then when I die, I'll be there with you. And his son said, Dad, what do you mean you'll be there? You're already here. You're already there. That's what he called the book, already here or already there. But it's like we're here and there simultaneously. And there is no separation between life and death. It's all happening simultaneously, just like past lives and future lives are happening simultaneously, or lives on Earth and lives in other dimensions or other planets are all happening simultaneously. So as we expand our consciousness and awareness, we get to connect with the different aspects of us that are living lives and experiences, and just, yeah. And so we can talk to our past in a past life. Oh, one of the first people I had on my radio show, because I started it about 12 years ago, was a hypnotist. Silver was his name. And he was saying he had someone under, and he was talking to a man in the past who was a doctor. And the experience of the person he was talking to through the person he'd hypnotized, I think it was him in a past life, but the person that was being hypnotized was living their life, and then this voice would come into their head and start talking to them. And this doctor who was living a couple of 100 years ago would say, oh, you again, but he was living in real time. Oh, you again, you're asking me all these questions and harassing me. And it was the hypnotist in, well, kind of in our time, it was a few years ago now, but you know, talking to this doctor through a client that he'd had under hypnosis.
Yeah.
But it was happening in real time. Like,
Yes.
just, it was sort of talking about the reality of time. It's all happening simultaneously. Did that answer your question?
What was my question? I'm just really enjoying the conversation, but I'm still something I struggle with, and some of my listeners struggle with, and Karin, you may not have the answer, and that's okay, but you know, we come here to have experiences and to learn, and to have contrast, but can't we have contrast without seeing famine and genocide and murder and violence and rape and all of those things? Isn't there, I'm sure there are on other planets that don't have those things, and there's still some form of contrast. You know how some say, well, if you swing one way to the one side of love, then you have to swing as all the way back to evil, because you can't have one without the other. Why can't we have neutral and then wonderful and then just back to neutral? Is that like an impossible universal law?
No, it's not impossible at all, but there's always a challenge. Like we incarnate into form, into density, whatever level of density. Like the third dimensional density is a very high level of density. There's a lot of density to overcome, or a lot of contrast, to challenge ourselves as a spirit, because there we are in spirit. We have ultimate access to all knowing, we're love and light. And then we want to challenge ourselves. We want to forget. So how much forgetting, how much we'll challenge ourselves is a choice. So let me put it this way. Now I've lost my train of thought. What was I going to say? So we'll ask your question again. Can we have contrast?
So I'll reword
it.
Okay.
Here's what I was going to say.
Okay.
In this dimension, desire is born from contrast. In higher dimensions, desire is not born from contrast. So what does that mean? So when we're sick, we desire to get well. When we're lonely, we desire to be not lonely. You know, when we're poor, we desire money.
Sure.
So we experience the contrast, and through the contrast, we give birth to desire. So what you're asking is, do we have to have the contrast in order to have the desire? So think about desire born from more or better. So say you create something, you design something, like maybe you make a dish of some food and it's really delicious. And then you think to yourself, yeah, but I could put sweet potato in instead of potato, and I could put this spice in instead of that spice, and then it would be different and maybe better. So desire is born out of creativity rather than contrast. So in other dimensions, not experiencing the amount of contrast that we have, the desire is born from wanting to improve and better their society rather than overcoming the contrast or overcoming the challenges. So as we evolve into the next level of human civilization, the next step, we're moving out of that desire born out of, trying to right the wrongs into a more creative way where we're just trying to improve and better our experience and our society. And that's where we're going. It doesn't look like that because I was watching, there's something called Gravitas, which is on YouTube.
Mhm.
Indian woman presents the news, and she was going across the world talking about Sri Lanka and Lebanon and Holland, and like the world seems to be in complete chaos.
Mhm.
It's just like Lebanon's political things have collapsed, and Sri Lanka has collapsed, and the Dutch farmers are all up in arms, and Italy is the same. It's like the world's in chaos.
Mhm.
And so what's happening is there's the destruction of an old system based in fear and unfair and scarcity and limitation and competition. And we're moving into a new system of more unification, collaboration, and a more fair,
Yeah.
unified society.
I just still struggle with the idea of, I know we can have contrast without extreme injustice. I think we can have a planet with contrast when you say that we're going there. So my questions have often, oh, bless you. My questions have often been, why, why the necessity for such, tragedy, um, to have
Okay.
to experience
I,
our contrast. For example, as I chose to come here for some particular reason, and I feel like, looking at it from my perspective, I feel like, oh, this spirit that inhabits this Julie vehicle was kind of selfish, really, to say, well, I want to have a life of contrast on Earth, even though I know that that's going to continue to cause harm and perpetuate this cyclical thing on this planet of the tragedy and the all of the awful things that I said, famine, genocide, evil rulers, and it's just so massive. I just think, why didn't my spirit decide to just incarnate somewhere else to not give any, like when you don't like what a place is doing, or a band or a restaurant or whatever, and you stop going there because that's how you show that you'd like that to end or them to change their ways. Stop going to the planet and the planet maybe will change its ways. Maybe I'm wrong on that.
well, no, that's exactly what you're doing here, Julie. You're on the transition team. So remember, there's no such thing as linear time. So everything's happening all at once. So when you insert yourself into the Earth experience, you do so through all time and space. So you say, I'm going to come to Earth. I'm going to experience what Earth has to offer. And there is this precipice, this time, in this time that we're in now,
Mhm.
where Earth is moving, it's shifting eras, yugas, it's changing from a third density consciousness to a fourth density consciousness, and eventually to a fifth density consciousness. It's an exciting time on Earth where old structures are falling and new structures are happening. And I want to be a part of that. I'm on the transition team. I'm going to help people shift their thinking and shift their knowing and open their what's been limited and considered woo-woo or crazy. I'm going to, show them that it's actually a part of who we are. But first I have to understand the Earth experience. So I have to understand contrast, because I'm coming into a time where I'm going to experience a lot of it, because all the old systems like are coming to the fore to be witnessed and then dissolved. Like we have to see it. So I'm going to incarnate in the time of the dinosaurs, and in Lemuria, I'm going to understand what a matriarchal society was like, where women ruled. And then I'm going to understand a patriarchal society. I'm going to understand my powers as a human. I'm going to come in the Atlantean time. I'm going to come in the Egyptian time and study in the mystery schools. I'm going to come in the future, but you do it through all time and space. And then during this time of great shift, you're drawing from your future lives, your lives on other planets, you're drawing from your past lives for you to be, Julie, in this lifetime, someone who's a part of the transition team, who's helping this world shift out of one era into the next. And so it's a very exciting time on earth. You participating in the contrast doesn't mean that you're exaggerating it or expanding it. And from your perspective, your spiritual perspective, the greater the contrast, the greater the challenge, and the more excited you are to get involved. It's kind of like if you're doing an obstacle course, if you get really good at it, the greater the obstacle course, the more excited you are to do it, even though you could possibly die doing it. But you're going to sharpen your skill because you've studied so much, or you've worked hard to, to overcome the obstacles. Did that answer your question?
Somewhat. I am curious, the afterlife that we all talk about, is that really our permanent home? Because we do incarnate everywhere all over the time. So is
Mhm.
that our permanent home, or how would you describe that?
Well, there's a part of you, call your soul or your higher self, that is permanently in a state, a frequential state. It's not necessarily experiencing what we understand as a life journey. You can die and maintain or retain a physical human form. And in that experience, you understand you're the creator of your reality. So at the speed of thought, you can look like Karen, or
Hmm.
you could look like, Elvis Presley, or you could look like
Hmm.
Cleopatra, or you could look like whoever you've been or you want to be. Like, you understand that thought creates reality, and it's all energy. So
Yeah,
you can think about it and you look like that. So
sure.
you can kind of play, and that's an experience. But who we are is energy orbs that don't have form. And there is an energy orb that lives in a frequency that is pure positive energy. Call it the energy of God, which is your higher self,
Okay.
which is an extension of the source. It's like it's like the hologram. You know what a hologram is?
Hmm.
It's
Sure.
like it's like the drop of an ocean. You take a drop out of the ocean, it contains within the drop the whole. That's, the whole. You're the ocean in
Sure.
the drop, and a drop in an ocean.
Right. Yeah.
And so we are like our higher self, our group soul is like a hologram of the divine. We contain within us everything that the divine does, or people call it God. And that exists always as this energy source, as a source of energy,
Hmm.
which is which we draw on as we incarnate into form, either spiritual form or spirit form or physical form. Does that make sense? So we're
Hmm.
always in that
Yeah.
place. We're always this energy pulsing frequency, and then we extend an aspect of that frequency into a perceived separateness, but we're still connected. It's like a ray of the sun comes out of the sun, and then that has an opportunity to incarnate into, like all over the cosmos, into multiple lives and have experiences. It's so vast who we are. It's beyond my understanding. I'm pretty sure from this linear mind's, perspective, my guides have done it, their darndest to show me exactly how it works. They've given me images, and
Yeah.
I remember they gave me this whole image, like sacred geometry image, because I was asking questions, never stop asking questions. And it was so beautiful. And I said, oh, wow, what do you want me to do with this? Do you want me to show this to people? Because I don't know how to explain it with words. I'd have to
Yeah.
draw it, but then I'd have to
Hmm.
draw it in a 3D way. I couldn't draw it on a flat
Right.
piece of paper.
Right.
So it's because everything's moving, and it's kind of like,
Yes.
if you see, they call it the great central sun. They call God sometimes the great central sun. If you see your higher self as the great central sun, and then all these rays coming out from the sun, and on different parts of the rays is like one life, but different parts of the ray is having different experiences. Just say the end of the ray is the human life, and then further up the ray is your astral body, and then further up the ray is your spiritual body, and then
Right.
further up the ray is, on this one ray that's coming out from the sun, there's all many different aspects of you living different lives. So there's
Yeah.
Julie, physical Julie, talking to Karen, but there's also spiritual Julie or astral Julie having
Right.
astral
Yep.
experiences
Hmm.
now. And there's
Yes.
also
Yes.
spiritual Julie, who's a spirit guide, who's cruising around in spirit. And then
Yes,
there's, you know,
yes.
that there's many dimensions of us. And then on another ray coming out from you, your higher self or oversoul, there's like another life. There's you as a man in another life, or you on other planets, and then your astral body from that life, and then
Mhm.
your spiritual body from that life. And we are vast. We are vast.
This conversation could go on for a very long time. There's so much to talk about, but we're already running out of time. And before we do, I want to make sure people can connect with you. And then, are you working on any new projects? And I want to put all the links up to, how people can connect with you, your books, your
Yeah.
website, your podcast. So all of that, make sure and text me that information because I want to put it up.
Yeah. So am I working on projects? Well, I do private sessions with people. A lot of people like, who am I? Why am I here? What am I doing here? And
Yeah.
what I do with people, I love to get them connected to their spirit guides. So I'm very connected to my guides. The questions that I asked a lot, were answered both through life, and then they came to meet me, in the form of mum initially. Like, she was my
Yeah.
first spirit guide, I suppose. But even though when I was dreaming about her, I didn't see her as a spirit guide, because she just looked like, I felt like I was on earth. And,
Yeah.
like, we've got to open our minds, because I didn't understand any of this stuff as a kid. And now I speak to anyone. I can speak to anybody, dead people, ascended masters. Jesus Christ was one of the first, because I didn't really believe in Jesus Christ. I used to think that people that talked about Jesus Christ were God botherers, I called them, because Jesus
Mm.
was always trying to save your soul.
Hmm.
Because remember, I had no religious upbringing, and people
Right.
were all like, Jesus will save you, and he's the only, all the born
Yes.
again Christians say he's the, and it really used to piss me off. But I used to think to myself, he'd be so pissed off if he knew you were talking about him like that, like I knew him personally.
Uh-huh.
Turns out I did. Turns out that I was incarnated in the time when he walked the earth, and I did know him. So he
Ooh.
came to meet me one day. I remember thinking, who are my spirit guides? And I had no identity and no name, because they thought that question was hilarious, that I would even ask, looking for a form like a person. And then he stepped forward and showed himself to me, and I said, "You."
Surprise.
And then he said, "I've been many forms. This is just one form that you remember me as, or people know me as, or they talk about on Earth, but I've been many forms,
Yeah.
like Galactic Jesus. I think he's more extraterrestrial than he's been human,
Mm.
as a highly evolved soul."
Hmm.
And where was I going with this? Yeah, so I teach people about their spirit guides, because I think it's really important to understand that you have a team, a spiritual team as close to you as breathing, that are constantly helping you as a soul navigate this dense, contrasting environment, and then opening your psychic abilities. And I have courses about deliberate creation. Um,
Mm.
the Arcturians or the Ascended Masters have said to me that the most important thing we need to remember as humans is our powers of creation, because the
Mm.
illusion here and the buffer of time, when you think a thought, you don't equate what is happening to you that you somehow created that. We
Right.
feel victimized, we
Yes,
feel
yes.
lucky,
True.
or we feel victimized. And
Yeah.
when you understand that every thought is creative, and that we're inside an illusion of consensus belief, so we're experiencing things simultaneously because we're buying into consensus belief. And then you can actually pull yourself out of the matrix by saying, hang on, just
Mm.
because everyone believes this, is this what I want to believe? Which is
Mm.
what you and I are doing, right? So there's
Hmm.
this consensus belief that, not so much now, not so much in my world, that psychic ability is woo or strange or not common, or that speaking to dead people is
Right.
strange or not common, or
Right.
that extraterrestrial life is ridiculous and doesn't exist. There's a
Right.
consensus belief, and everyone dips along believing that that's the truth. It's
Hmm.
like they didn't decide that, it's just they've bought into the
Yeah.
consensus.
Yep.
And then they pull themselves out of the matrix, and they say,
Yes.
actually, that's not what I want to believe. I want
Yep.
to I want to move beyond the limitation of the consensus belief.
Yep.
And so a lot of the things that we create, it's just that we've bought into it. And then we have
Right.
as deliberate creators, we have the ability to not buy into it, and to think differently,
Mm.
and to believe differently. And we have a
Hmm.
different experience here on planet Earth.
I like that.
And so that's what I'm passionate about, teaching people about their powers of creation. People say, I'm sick, I want to get well, or I want more money,
Here
or I
and
want to
there,
be a
powers of
healer.
creation on the other side as well, right?
Well,
Much,
we know
much
that we
quicker.
create. We know that thought creates, because when we're in a different dimension, different frequency outside time, we see thought manifesting instantly. So we think it and it happens instantly. So we
Yeah.
understand completely that thought creates our
Yes.
reality.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of like, it's just like we're breathing now. It's not something you have to think about or believe. It just is.
Right.
It's like we're breathing. So, but
Mm-hmm.
as humans, we're in this buffer of time and third density where we
Mm-hmm.
do not understand that.
Yeah.
So the ascended masters and the highly evolved, like the races that are helping us from other dimensions and planets said, you humans need to understand your powers of creation. And when you do,
Yeah.
your world will change. You'll stop
Mm-hmm.
playing victim to the contrast, and you'll see the contrast as an opportunity to choose.
Mm.
When something happens, it gives us this is this what I want to create? So every time we feel angry or upset, or something happens, right, and then we get upset about it, in that moment you feel that frequency, and then you can choose, is this what I want to feel?
Yeah. Yeah. Mm.
I can choose to feel, I can experience the same thing that I don't agree with and feel differently
Hmm.
by thinking about it differently, by
Mm-hmm.
changing my perception, my worldview, my
Sure.
yeah.
I
So
like that.
we
Mm-hmm.
we are powerful. We are powerful, and we don't understand our power. So that's what I teach.
Yeah,
So I
I
teach
love
that in
that.
courses. I teach that in sessions. We have a inner sanctum session, which I've opened up to free or by donation once a month, where I get online and just to get, how you said, like, you've got your group because I wanted to bring people together because I feel alone in my, so that's what the inner sanctum is about. And
Nice.
once a month or twice a month, sometimes I invite someone from the show to come and meet the group, and the group can ask them, quiz them questions too. We had Claudia Edge in the Inner Sanctum last
Yeah,
week.
I interviewed
Have you
her.
had her?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Spirit School. I said to Claudia, so your spirit school is in your books, but have you ever done like a spirit school on Zoom? And she said no. And I said, well, let's do it. So
Oh,
we called it Spirit School. She was a
okay.
bit nervous at first, but she was good, because she was like, ooh, I don't see myself as the teacher. I just write
Yeah.
books. I
Yeah.
like to
Yeah.
sort of shake people up, and they think they're one way, and I'm like, I like to challenge them and like open them up to new possibilities. I do that with everyone. I do that
Very
with the
good.
people I speak to on the show, as well as my clients, as well as my friends and family. Yeah.
And how can listeners connect with you? Do you have a
So
website, I'm
the
assuming?
website's karenswain.com. It's just my name.com.
Okay.
And the show, you'll see the shows there, and the books there. The book
Oh,
Awakened by
okay.
Death is the book of the compilation of 12 different people, including mine, who had a spiritual awakening through the death experience. So I
Mm,
believe that my spiritual awakening happened because mum transitioned, and then that, that I was asking more questions, and her coming to me in spirit. And so
yeah.
her death was my spiritual awakening, even though
Hmm.
I was curious before that.
It's interesting.
It
Yeah.
really put me on the path, and people have had their own NDEs. And
Mhm.
yeah, the woman I had on the show, I've got the podcast show, like you, ATP Media, which stands for Accentuate the Positive, Awakening Consciousness. Yeah, I started the shows to teach deliberate creation on
Yeah.
radio, because I thought, this crap we listen to on radio, wouldn't it be amazing if somebody was teaching us about our powers of creation? But it's changed over the years, and I'm like you, Julie, I just get so fascinated with people's stories.
Hmm.
Like, I just want to hear people's stories. So
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, yeah.
Me too. Me too. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. This has been a
Oh,
lot of
thanks.
fun. I really appreciate it. We're going to keep in touch, and I'm going to be interested to see all that you do, because I know you're a very busy woman.
Yeah,
Very
we
busy
put on a
woman.
lot of events here in Sydney, and I'm doing a lot of online conferences next year. We're doing some more seminars and online conferences. We put on
Awesome.
the Galactic Goddesses Connect Hearts Across the
Wow.
world, which were some galactic, teachers from around the world coming together, like Mary Rodwell and Geraldine Roscoe and Barbara Lamb and all sorts of people, Bridget. And we were throwing questions about what's happening on planet Earth, and how is it, just talking to the galactic goddesses and how the galactic forces
Wow.
helping us. And And we're going to do that with the guys too, probably in November, get the galactic guys together, people
Okay.
like Grant Cameron and, you know, the sort of
Okay.
people that talk about this stuff and talk about the, yeah. So, and then next year we're putting on some more seminars, online seminars. Yeah. Busy, busy, busy,
Busy, busy, busy. So
busy,
thank you for
busy.
taking time with me. I appreciate it. And so we're going to sign off. We've already been an hour, believe it or not. This goes by so fast. Thank you to everyone listening. This has been Julie McVeigh with Unordinary Made Ordinary. And if you enjoyed this interview, give it a thumbs up. And if you like the type of content we're sharing on the channel, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and then you'll be alerted to future videos. I hope you're all having a lovely day or evening wherever you are on the planet or off the planet. And we will see you all next time. Bye.